Most people hear the word entanglement and think metaphor. Soulmates, invisible bonds, two people drawn together by something unseen. But in physics, entanglement is not poetry. It is a measured, reproducible property of quantum systems. It describes what happens when two systems exchange enough information that they can no longer be described independently. Now take that definition, not as romance, but as mechanism, and apply it to what happens inside a human nervous system after years of deep relational contact. When a relationship ends, the person leaves. The nervous system doesn't. Your brain may have spent months, sometimes years, building a predictive model of that individual, learning their patterns, their rhythms, the micro-signals that indicate mood before words are spoken. That model does not delete itself when proximity ends. It continues running. This isn't mystical, and it isn't weakness. It's a biological system doing exactly what it was designed to do, and understanding why requires precision. Before we go further into mechanism, let's slow down on what this actually looks like in daily life, because the experience comes first, the explanation comes after. You wake up and before you've checked your phone, before you've spoken a word, you're already thinking about them. Not because you chose to, because your brain completed a pattern it started the night before. You're in a meeting, fully present, and then someone uses a particular phrase, a tone, a hand gesture that resembles theirs, and for a fraction of a second, your nervous system registers it. Not your conscious mind, your nervous system. Or consider this, long-term partners who, after years together, begin making decisions by instinctively factoring in the other person, even when that person isn't in the room. Not out of obligation, out of structural integration. The other person has become part of the decision-making architecture. Or twins, separated by geography, operating in entirely different contexts, who report a sudden, inexplicable awareness of distress in the other at the exact moment something goes wrong. It's tempting to call this mystical, psychic, spiritual, but before we assign it to mystery, notice what's observable. Behavioral synchronization, pattern recognition, nervous system calibration to another system over time. These experiences do not require quantum mechanics to be meaningful. They require structure. And the most rigorous framework we have for understanding correlated systems, systems that influence each other across space and time, begins not in psychology. It begins in particle physics. Let's be precise about what quantum entanglement actually is, because the popular version has drifted far from the physics. In quantum mechanics, particles are not fixed objects with definite properties. Before they are measured, they exist in a state of multiple simultaneous possibilities. Think of it less like a coin that is either heads or tails, and more like a coin that is genuinely both, until the moment you look at it. When two particles interact under specific conditions, their possibilities become linked. From that point forward, they are entangled. Here is what that means in practice. Measure one particle, force it to choose a definite state, and the other particle instantly reflects a corresponding state, not after a delay, instantly, regardless of the distance between them. This has been tested, replicated, confirmed at distances exceeding 1,000 kilometers. But here is the critical detail most explanations skip. This is not communication. The particles are not sending signals to each other. There is no message traveling between them. What is actually happening is this. The two particles are not truly separate systems. They became, through their interaction, one system, described by a single shared set of possibilities. When you measure one, you are not sending information to the other. You are simply revealing the state of a system that was always unified. Entanglement is not about emotion. It is about correlation. The particles do not know each other. They do not feel each other. Their properties are simply no longer independent. You cannot describe one without referencing the system they both belong to. The word quantum has become part of everyday language, often used to describe anything mysterious or profound. In physics, however, it has a very specific meaning. So to stay precise, let's separate metaphor from measurement. Can two people become quantum entangled? No. Human bodies are large, warm, complex biological systems. The quantum effects that govern particles require extraordinarily controlled conditions, and at the scale of a human nervous system, those conditions don't hold. We are not particles. Humans are not quantum entangled, but we can become deeply correlated. And correlation is the bridge. Here's what we missed for a long time. Entanglement is not just a quantum phenomenon, it's a systems phenomenon, and humans are systems. When two systems interact repeatedly and deeply, their behaviors begin to reflect each other. Their outputs become correlated. Their internal states develop mutual dependencies. Over time, you cannot accurately describe one without accounting for the influence of the other. That is entanglement at the systems level, not a metaphor borrowed from physics. The same underlying logic, operating at a different scale. Let's now look at what this actually does to two human nervous systems over time. When two people interact repeatedly, especially under conditions of emotional significance, their bodies begin to physically synchronize. Not figuratively, physically. Research in interpersonal neurobiology, the study of how close relationships reshape the brain and body, has documented this consistently. When people spend significant time together in emotionally meaningful contexts, their heart rate patterns begin to align. Their stress hormone levels mirror each other. Their breathing coordinates. This process is called co-regulation. It simply means that two nervous systems have begun to use each other as reference points. For calm, for safety, for threat. And it is not a choice. It is automatic. But the process goes deeper than physical rhythm. Your brain's primary job is not to perceive the world as it is. Its primary job is to predict what comes next, and to do so efficiently, using the least amount of energy possible. To predict efficiently, it builds models. Internal simulations of people, environments, and patterns it encounters repeatedly. When someone is consistently present in your life, your brain builds a model of them. It encodes their behavioral patterns, their emotional baseline, the specific delay between something happening and the way they respond, which is unique to them, like a signature. Over time, that model becomes embedded in the way your brain processes the world. This is why you can sometimes sense that something is wrong before a word is spoken. You are not reading minds. You are detecting a deviation, a gap between what your brain predicted based on everything it knows about this person and what it is currently observing. And here is the structural point. Once that model exists, it does not require the person's presence to keep running. Your brain does not automatically archive a model simply because physical proximity has ended. The simulation continues. It continues to make predictions. It continues to shape your responses, including your responses to situations that, on the surface, have nothing to do with that person. This is why distance doesn't always dissolve connection. It reorganizes it. The connection moves from external, maintained through interaction, to internal, maintained through the model your brain is still running. But the influence remains active. Think about the decisions you made this week. How many of them were shaped, even subtly, by imagining how a specific person would respond? Someone you no longer see. Someone you may not have spoken to in months or years. You didn't feel them across space. You anticipated them. That anticipation is not irrational. It is architectural. It is your nervous system operating exactly as designed, maintaining and referencing models it once built for good structural reasons. If someone has left your life, but still shapes your reactions, you are not irrational. You are correlated. Your brain built a model, That model is still active. It continues to make predictions, to generate anticipations, to influence your responses, long after the interaction that created it has ended. And this is the part that most frameworks miss. You do not resolve this through forgetting. Memory is not the mechanism. The model is the mechanism. What changes a correlation is not the erasure of data. It is the introduction of new data that updates the prediction. In systems terms, the model recalibrates when it receives sufficient new input that contradicts its existing predictions. This is why certain relationships can only be integrated, not left behind. The nervous system doesn't delete. It updates. New experiences, new patterns, relationships that generate different regulatory data. Over time, the old model doesn't disappear. It loses predictive priority. And here is where the physics parallel becomes useful again, not as metaphor, but as logic. In quantum entanglement, correlation does not mean control. Knowing the state of one particle gives you information about the other, but it does not let you determine the other's outcome. Influence, not control. The same is true here. Someone can be encoded deeply in your nervous system, can shape your predictions, your reactions, your baseline emotional tone, without determining your choices. You can be correlated without being controlled. Let's install this distinction clearly, because it is the most practically useful idea in this entire episode. Correlation means the state of one system gives you information about another. Control would mean one system determines the other's outcome. These are not the same. Most human bonds involve correlation, not control. Someone can influence your internal state without determining it, but this is where people get trapped. They confuse influence with destiny, attachment with fate, correlation with causation. Structure is not prophecy. Structure is just structure, and structure can be updated, not by force, not by denial, but by new information. New experiences that generate data the old model never had. New relationships that teach the nervous system a different set of rules. New patterns of thought that interrupt the automatic simulation and replace it with something more current. This is not self-help language dressed in science. This is literally how predictive systems recalibrate. The model updates when the data changes. You have more influence over that data than you may currently believe. Entanglement does not mean destiny. It means influence. You are not quantum entangled with anyone, but you are structurally shaped by the systems you have exchanged information with. Some of those correlations stabilize you, some distort you, and most of them continue running, whether you are aware of them or not. The question is not whether you are connected. The question is, who is still influencing your internal state? And are you updating the model? Awareness doesn't sever correlation. It changes how you participate in it. When you see the pattern clearly, when you can name the model and trace its origin, it loses some of its automatic authority. It doesn't disappear, but it becomes something you can examine rather than something you are simply subject to. That is not freedom from influence, that is agency within it. And that distinction between being influenced and being controlled is perhaps the most useful thing physics has ever quietly suggested about what it means to be human. Entanglement is a property of reality. So is the capacity to observe it. If you'd like a structured checklist for updating relational models, I've included a downloadable guide in the description.